and I share your outrage, Laura. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here with Dr. Jill Stein and fellow local Green candidates. Today I was canvassing along Telegraph Avenue, and I heard the same question: what is your motivation to run this race? And my answer has become pretty standard, and it's the injustice that I see in the streets. And by injustice, I'm referring to the widespread poverty among obscene wealth. So, to look at this setting, if you will, a couple of different lenses. So, Oakland is situated at the epicenter of the highest wealth concentration in the world. So, if we cannot solve our problem with poverty, that means it's an unsolvable problem. And yet we know that's not true. So that's just to kind of look at it from an abstract way, right? We don't need to work with numbers, but we can just see that that's just inconceivable, is unacceptable, and it's mind-boggling. Another way, in the last 2 weeks, the local tech companies have lost $1 trillion of market capitalization. So that is $1 million of wealth evaporated amongst people who haven't even noticed the absence of $1 million in their bank accounts. And they're all here. And they're all here, right? And yet, no one has lost sleep. No one has been fired. No one has, honestly, has even noticed. And people say, oh, it's like, that's just funny money. That's not true. The assets and the ownership in those corporations is every bit as real as the ownership of a piece of land. So that is real money that got evaporated. And these wealthy people have to literally step over our homeless brothers and sisters in order to get to work each day. So it's not like they don't know it. So just this contrast, right? I mean, when I say injustice, that's what I'm talking. That's like just gross injustice. Any one of them could solve our poverty issue locally without even noticing. Many of them probably could solve it by the money they make from the time they go to bed until they wake up the next morning. And that's real, right? So that's what has motivated me. But that's not the only aspect of injustice. Criminalization of our black and brown youth that causes disruption in lives, destroys the public trust in our law enforcement, and ultimately endangers everyone's safety. The substandard education that affects the low-income families disproportionately by denying our children the upward mobility, and the list goes on. But it doesn't have to be this way. But it will continue to be this way unless the government steps in to equalize the gross imbalance in our society. And that's where we come in, because it is impossible for the two corporately owned parties to do anything about it. This is all a result of their negligence and intentional programs. So those are my motivations for being in this race. The first principle that I have put out there as a number one priority, or as a number one must, is integrity. We have completely given up on integrity in our politicians. Every single time we hear, but he or she's a politician, what do you expect? I expect integrity. Yes. Not lies. My second principle is social solidarity. I summed it up to this gentleman earlier today. It's because we have to cross-care for each other. Our greatest asset, especially around here, is our diversity. And it's, instead of becoming our best asset, has become our worst enemy. whereby we are forced to think of a zero-sum game where my gains are somebody else's loss, and we are not really locking arms and looking out for each other's best interest. And my third principle is accountability. And I have practiced that, or have begun practicing it to me, accountability is one, that we put out our campaign promises out there. To me, that establishes the kind of framework for accountability. And then once elected, we mandate that our politicians give us quarterly or regularly reports on their campaign promises. This is a standard practice in the private industry, and yet we don't enforce it in the public officials and the elected officials. So, for their many flaws, there is one thing that we can learn from the capitalists, and that is quarterly reporting and accountability. That's another aspect and promise that I have made in my campaign. So with that, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here.